Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. In this video we will be talking about the new polls in the 2024 general election, President Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. So we will be looking at all of the polls across each state and seeing where the states are currently going to fall when you just look at polls. Now, before I get into this video, I do want to say that this is not a prediction. Other factors go into a prediction besides just polls. But still, it is important to look at the polls because the polls are typically a good indicator in the general direction that a presidential race is going. So, we have the polls from each state, and we will be filling in this map all the way from Alabama to Wyoming. We're going in alphabetical order to see who polls predict will win the 2024 election. So with that being said, let's start with Alabama. So we do, in every state, there were polls that were done between Kennedy and Biden alone, as well as Kennedy versus Trump, head-to-head matchups, I should say, between Kennedy and the two-party candidates. The Kennedy campaign funded these polls, but we will just be looking at the head-to-head matchup between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. So we see in Alabama here that in the three polls that were conducted, Donald Trump leads by 20, 19, and 25. So this would be characterized as a safe state for Donald Trump. So a safe state is a state that is decided by a 5 to 15% margin for the respective candidate. We also have likely states, which are states that are decided by a 5 to 15% margin, as well as lean margins, which are decided by 1 to 5%, and tilt, which is less than 1% margins. So Trump wins Alabama. Looking now at Alaska, we have quite a few polls actually that were conducted here. We see that Donald Trump leads by 23 here. He leads by 19 here. So both of those are safe margin wins. But then we have 12, 12, 8, 8, and 7. So you do see when you factor in all of the polls, on average, this margin would fall under the 15% margin needed for a safe margin victory. So this would be a likely state for Donald Trump. Now let's move on to Arizona, which is one of the most critical battleground states, and we see that on average, Donald Trump does lead Biden and Kennedy by 3.5%. So this definitely has narrowed up from a little bit ago. A couple months ago, we were seeing, the last time I did this, Donald Trump was leading here according to polls by a likely margin, which was really a surprise. I mean, that really does seem outlandish to a lot of people. But regardless, Donald Trump does still win Arizona despite the margin, and he does win all of the 11 electoral votes. That would be a huge win to Biden because he won Arizona in 2020, so that would be a flip to Donald Trump. Now let's move on to Arkansas, of course, a safe Republican state. Donald Trump leads by a safe margin there, no surprise there. And then we have California, typically a safe Democratic state, and we see here that Biden does lead by 20% over Kennedy and Trump. So Biden does win California handily. Then we have Colorado. So we see in the Trump versus Biden polls, we see Biden lead by 10, by 4, by 5, by 6, by 8, by 13, by 7. So all of the polls conducted, all besides one, do show Biden leading by a likely margin, so that is where the state would fall. That is somewhat of a decrease from 2020 when Biden won by 13.5%, but not a huge blow from what we're seeing so far. In Connecticut, Biden leads by 9, by 13, by 14, by 13. All of these would be a likely margin win. That'd be about a 10-point win for Joe Biden there. Another decrease. He won it by 20 back in 2020. He won it by 20% in 2020. So that just shows you how much worse Biden is doing this time around compared to 2020. We have we have no polls out of Delaware because the only polls conducted were between, were the Kennedy ones where he was just matched up between Biden and Trump. But, I mean, look at that. I mean, against Kennedy, Biden only wins by 4% in his home state, in Biden's home state. So that's a huge surprise. But When there are no polls conducted, that typically signifies that it's not competitive at all. So if a poll hasn't been conducted in a state, then we will be characterizing it as a safe state. So Delaware would be safe. Of course, Washington D.C. Of course, is a safe state. Sorry, that's from 2020. What's shown there? In Florida. Looking at 2024. Now, we see that Donald Trump leads by almost 10%. Now, if you showed this to somebody 10 years ago, they would not believe you, because this was once, not too long ago, a critical battleground state. If you go back to 2016, Trump won the state by 1%, but he expanded on his victory in 2020, and then Republicans did very well here in 2022. The governor, Ron DeSantis, winning by 20%. So, polls do indicate that Donald Trump wins by a likely margin in Florida. Then we come to one of the most critical battleground states in presidential elections, and that is Georgia. And we see that Donald Trump leads by 6%. And this is a flip. That's a likely margin win. And that is a flip from 2020, where Biden won this state. That would be incredible if this state did trend 6% towards the Republicans. I mean, that would be really shocking if these polls do hold true and Donald Trump were to win by a likely margin. And I honestly don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. So as of now, Joe Biden leads with 77 electoral votes to Trump's 75. Now let's look at Hawaii. Oh my gosh! Wow, I did not even know that these polls happened, but this one poll shows Biden up by only 8% in a state that he won by 29% in 2020. That would be really shocking. But on average, when you average these polls out, these two polls, it would show Biden leading by a likely margin. And even that would be really insane if that happens. In Idaho, one poll conducted between Biden and Trump. Trump leads by a safe margin. No surprise there. We have Illinois now, where we see Biden lead by 10, by 20. Big difference here. 12, 9, and 9. So on average, this would signify a likely margin win for Illinois. That is in line with my current prediction as well. In Indiana, only two Biden versus Trump polls. Trump leads by 21 and 19. Both of those are a safe margin win for Trump. Now let's look at Iowa, where we've only had 4 polls conducted between Biden and Trump, and you see here Trump leads by 15, and this is one of the most accurate pollsters in the country, the Des Moines Register, in partnership with Ann Selzer, which actually showed Trump winning by 15%, but when you average all of the polls out, which is what we're doing in this video, that's a likely margin win rather than safe. And then you come to Kansas, where Trump leads by 16, 14, 16, and 11. So with that 11-point lead, this lead does come to just below a 15% margin to make it a likely margin win, which actually does surprise me quite a bit. Looking at Kentucky, that's a safe margin win for Trump there. No surprise there. Louisiana, wow, I'm surprised. Wow, so way closer than I expected, but it is a safe margin win. But we have 15% here, and then we have 14 and 15, and a 15% margin would be a safe margin. But that's really surprising that it's even that close, because Trump actually won there by 18, by 19 when you round in 2020. Looking at Maine, now, there were some really shock polls coming out of Maine. So there have only been, recently at least, in this year, because that is the polls that we're looking at just from this year, that show Trump winning the state of Maine. The Maine at large actually goes to Trump in this poll by 6%. He wins Maine's 2nd district by 20%. And Biden only wins the 1st district by 8. Now that's a huge shift. Maine went to Biden at large by 9%. He won the 1st district by 23%. And Donald Trump won the 2nd district by 7%. So that's going from 7% in 2020 to 20% margin for Trump in 2024. So looking at these polls, it's, again, a safe margin victory for Trump in Maine second. What was it at large? That's a 6-point margin win. That's a likely margin win for Trump in Maine at large. And then I believe a likely margin win for Biden in the 1st district. And that was really a huge surprise to a lot of people. And that poll is going very unnoticed. Then we have Maryland, where we see there have been quite a few polls here, basically all of which show Biden leading by a safe margin there. And then we have Massachusetts, where, let's see, against Trump, Biden wins by a safe margin in all of them. That's, again, not a surprise. A very Democratic state, Massachusetts is. Then we have Michigan, where you see that the polls have been narrowing a lot lately. And Donald Trump is actually leading by less than 1%, by just 0.7%, which is a tilt margin. But still, that is very important because despite the margin, he wins all of the electoral votes. You could win it by 1 vote or a million votes, but you still win the state. But according to polls, right now, that is, a real shock. Trump wins Michigan by 0.7. Not necessarily the result, but that the polls are signifying this close of a race. So that'd be a big win for the Trump campaign. Then we see Minnesota, where we have had some very interesting polls come out recently, where we see Biden ahead by 2, but then Trump lead by 3, by 5. But then you have 3 more polls where where Biden leads by 2, and then 8, and then 8. So these 8-point leads for Biden are very critical because that really bumps up the average for him here. So he leads by 4, or he leads in 4 of the 6 polls, so Minnesota definitely goes to him. And it looks like he leads by about a lean margin in Minnesota. But very interesting that any polls, and then we have an even poll here as well. I didn't even see that. But interesting that any polls actually show Trump leading in the state, considering that Biden won it by 7% in 2020. In Mississippi, only one head-to-head, which Trump leads by 18 percentage points. We see Missouri, Trump leads basically every head-to-head poll. And then we come to Montana, where Trump leads every head-to-head poll. We have Nebraska, which also splits their electoral votes by congressional district. And these polls are interesting, I will say. These are from last year, so we can disregard those. But we only have 3 head-to-head polls, but they are sponsored by a candidate running for Senate as an independent, who in this poll, whatever, I don't know. But, he is a more progressive candidate, and he sponsored these polls, and these polls also had him, in a very close race with the Deb Fischer, the candidate for Senate. But still, the purpose of this video is just the 2024 election based off of polls from this year. So we see Trump leads by 3, statewide, and then by 23. And they're by the same pollster. And they were, I'm sorry. Okay, so this Nebraska 2nd District. I'm sorry. So this general election poll, disregard what I said, this at-large, Nebraska at-large, shows Trump ahead by 23, which is in line with what we have seen recently. And then in Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District, both of these polls show Donald Trump leading by 3. Now, so that's a lean margin win for him. So that is a flip. That's a big flip because Biden won it by 6.6% in 2020. So that would be a 9.6, a shift towards the right. And then Nebraska's 1st and Nebraska's 3rd district, we have no polls coming out of there, so we can assume that they will be safe for Donald Trump because of that reason. Then we have Nevada, again, one of the most critical battleground states. We see Donald Trump leading by 6.8%. A shocking 6.8%, I will say. That's a likely margin win for him. Nevada has not been that close, not even in 2012. It hasn't been that close since 2008 during the Obama landslide. So that's something to keep our eye on, especially since Biden led in polls in Nevada. In 2020, just to show you 2020 here, Biden led by 5. So, very, very interesting polls coming out of Nevada there, would show a big lead for Trump there. So, looking at the Trump versus Biden polls in New Hampshire now, we see that Biden leads by 3. He basically leads all of them by 3, by 7, by 7, by 10. Bernie Sanders was polled there. And then 3, or these are from last year, so we can disregard those. So he leads by, on average 3, 7, 7, and 10. So that would average out to a likely margin win for Joe Biden in the state of New Hampshire, which is honestly a lot more than I would expect, because that is very in line with his 7% margin victory in 2020. And I personally thought that this state would narrow up a lot in 2024, considering how independent those voters are. In New Jersey, only 2 polls were conducted, and we see that Biden leads by 5% in one, and he leads by 6% in one. That is such a narrow victory for a safe Democratic state like New Jersey, a state that he won by 16% in 2020. But still, regardless, it does go to him. In New Mexico, we see Biden lead by 8, by 11, by 10, by 7. All of those a likely margin victory, in line with how he did in 2020. And then in New York, a state that the Trump campaign is actually targeting increasingly recently, but the polls are a lot closer than they were in 2020. I will give him that, but not all that competitive. We see Biden leads by 19 here, but then by 10, by 10, by 12, by 9, by 9. All of those are a likely margin victory. So we can expect, according to polls, that Biden would win New York by about a likely margin, or by about a 10% victory, I should say. In North Carolina, a state that the Democrats are actually starting to target in 2024, which is a big surprise to a lot of people, considering that Trump did win the state in 2020. But according to polls, Trump leads by 6.1%. He only won it by 1.3 back in 2020. So that would be a likely margin win for Trump there in North Carolina. In North Dakota, of course, wow, look at that, 54-17. Absolutely abysmal. North Dakota does go to Trump there. And then Ohio, it's about in line, where he performed in 2020. Donald Trump leads by about 9.6% according to polls. So that gives Trump a likely margin victory there, just how it was in 2020. He won it by 8 in 2020. In Oklahoma, Trump leads by a very, very, very safe margin. In Oregon, we see Biden lead by 11, by 12, and then by 15, by 10. So on average, he does lead by a likely margin there. A lot of people are saying that Republicans could actually make inroads in a state like Oregon because they have a very independent-minded electorate. So a lot of Democrats would be willing to switch sides potentially in 2024. In Pennsylvania, the state that is said to decide the president in 2024. It is a must-win state for Joe Biden, definitely, and probably Donald Trump as well. But Pennsylvania goes to Trump, according to polls, by 1.8%. Now, this is a state that is that the polling goes against my prediction. I currently think that Biden actually does eke out a very narrow victory. But polls do indicate that Donald Trump leads in Pennsylvania by a lean margin, by a very narrow margin. In Rhode Island, and by the way, that is a flip from 2020, I will say. Biden won by 1.2%. In Rhode Island, let's see. Yeah, so Biden, on average, he wins by 17, then by 14. So on average, that is a safe margin win for him there. And then South Carolina, on average, Trump leads by a safe margin. Not much of a surprise. South Dakota, of course, is a safe margin, one of the most Republican states in the country. Tennessee is going to be a safe margin as well for Donald Trump. And then we have Texas. And by the way, I'll mind you, I meant to keep you updated with the electoral count, but Donald Trump is at 252. Joe Biden is at 195. Only a few states remain, so Joe Biden definitely has some ground to make up. And with Texas, it appears that he can't, because according to polling, Donald Trump leads in Texas by 10%. He won it by let's see, 5.6% back in 2020, so he does manage to make the state more Republican in 2024. That's what polls indicate, at least. But that's a likely margin win once again in Texas, and that puts Trump well over 270 at 292 electoral votes, and Donald Trump is elected president just like that. But continuing with Utah, these polls are all over the place. We see Trump lead by 24 here, Trump lead by 28, and then Trump lead by 8, and then 9, and then 10 and 13. It goes from an 8% victory to a 28% victory for Trump. I don't even know what's going on. On average, though, because of these 24 and 28 leads for Trump, this does narrowly become a safe state, over a 15% margin for Trump there. Then we have Vermont, which is a safe state for Biden. No surprises there. We have Virginia, where Biden leads by 4%, by only 1% here. But these are Trump-sponsored polls. By 3%, by only 1%. Again, these are a lot closer than I thought. And then by 6, and then by 5, and then by 4. So Biden does win every poll. And actually, all of these polls, except the 6% lead, do fall in the lean margin. So Virginia, according to polls, would go to Biden by a lean margin in 2024. Then we have Washington. Let's see. So this poll really, kind of went viral. This was shared a lot through social media. But Donald Trump led this poll by 5%, then another one by 1%. But the other ones show Biden up by 11, by 16, by 14. So when you average them out, Biden definitely does win, but it is only by just about a 5%. It's tough, but I think it does fall under the likely margin characterization. I think that he manages to get a lead on average by just over 5%, but a lot closer than it was in 2020. Went to Biden by 19% in 2020. Then we have West Virginia, of course, a safe state for Trump. And then we have Wisconsin, one of the most critical swing states in the nation. Donald Trump leads by 1.2% right now. Biden won the state by 0.6 in 2020. So this would be a flip for Donald Trump, and it is a lean margin win for him. And then Wyoming, of course, is safe Republican. So that puts Donald Trump at a larger victory than 2016. In 2016, he won with 306 electoral votes. He wins in 2024, according to polls right now, with 315 to Joe Biden's 223. So thank you all for watching this video. I really hope you all enjoyed. Make sure to drop a comment down below and also drop a like. That helps out a lot. Again, I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all next time.